out with what had happened. But at that age, sort of 9 years old, it's very difficult to articulate that and to understand it. And it wasn't until I went to uni and I was by myself for the first time, I didn't have a support network around me, that I realised that actually I wasn't doing that well. I had anxiety, panic attacks, sometimes I'd be scared to leave my room, didn't understand why. And it then, of course, sort of filtered into my work. So when I got a full-time job, I was working on a help desk. And if you have anxiety and panic attacks, a help desk environment is really not set up to cater for that. You're monitored and how to hold the phone for, how many breaks you take. You can't flex your time, you can't go home if you need to at different points. So it's just the nature of the work. But I didn't feel like I had a way to express what was happening or to talk to anyone. And I felt almost like I'd be penalised because going straight into a job from uni and not really being told what to expect from a good work environment, I didn't really understand what I could do, what my protections were, what my support would be. And so that was kind of my interest, and I felt that the Conservatives have been doing quite well, I think, to an extent with mental health, but it's something that, like any party, you're relying on the leader of the time and the people around them to really push the agenda forward with mental health. And I was quite worried that actually we were going to lose some of that momentum that started off probably around David Cameron's time, and then going to be fair to Theresa May, she was very strong on mental health as well, and it has continued, and I just want to make sure it does keep going. So Conservative Mental Health, it's a platform really and a voice, and I'm very comfortable criticising the government if I feel they're not doing enough, but also showing what we can do and what we are doing. But aside from that, I suppose my thoughts then on what we can do in the
What would be your wish list?
My wish list? I'm quite simple in terms of what I look for. I think it stems a lot from the culture, which is quite a broad thing to say, but companies, if they get the right culture there, so, and I don't mean in terms of the perks and drinks or ping pong table or whatever, but just knowing that line management know what they can do to help, that they're not fearful of the conversation, that anyone at any level within the business knows that they can actually reach out, they can say if they're having a problem, and actually know that there's support there and being heard. And I think those are the things that need to be done first. So reach out to companies, just looking at the big companies that can do maybe roll out all this like online learning and all sorts, but the small companies who maybe can't be as flexible with their employees, who can't put all this money into investing in all these different tools when there's maybe only 10 people in the company. But just making sure everyone understands that it's about your well-being at the end of the day. A happy workforce, you're going to be more productive, you're going to enjoy your work more, you'll probably stay longer, so there's staff turnover, all of those good things. But it does start with the education and the information, and not judging businesses either. But I think it's doing well in a lot of ways now. I mean, the company I worked for about 10 years, they started looking at how they could communicate mental health in terms of your energy levels in your life. So they did an online training that was literally a battery, and the battery kind of showed different levels for each part: your work life, your home life, your physical well-being, all of these different things. And it basically helped you to explore your whole well-being as a person, not just focusing on mental health, because I think there's maybe still a little bit of a stigma there. And if you go straight to what's your mental health like, I think a lot of people can be a bit sort of put on the spot and unsure about how to approach that. But yeah, I don't think there's anything massive that needs to be done that we can't just do by talking to businesses, reaching out, building those relationships. And also, one thing I'd like to see is people in school, as they're looking to leave and go into the workplace, talking to them and saying that, yes, it's going to be a bit of a culture shock for you, but aside from that, if you are struggling, whether it's at your home life, work life, family, whatever it might be, this is what you can expect and you should be able to expect from any employer that you go to. And I think people know from the start that they've been empowered to be able to speak up that will just do huge amount to change the way we look at it within the workplace.
Thank you very much indeed. Could you say a little about yourself and what can business and regulators do to solve matters?
Yes, hello, I'm Sarah Barnes. I'm the People and Culture Director at Bauer Media, and we've been lucky enough to partner with Mental Health First Aid for this campaign, the manifesto itself. So I guess as a result of using our channels, we reach over 20 million in terms of the audiences we serve. We've been able to use our brands through our radio stations, Absolute Radio, Kiss, Grazia, Heat, Closer, and we've been able to work with celebrities who've told their stories, their own personal journeys, which has been fantastic in terms of just raising awareness around the manifesto. I guess that has meant from a corporate perspective that we've got to be best in class. So the standards that were set by the Stevenson Farmer report, we have absolutely followed. But I think it's really important to say that it's not a short-term fix. It's a long-term programme, and I think it starts at the top of the organisation. It's really, really important that your leadership team embrace it and take it really seriously. So, you know, every organisation needs to stand up and tackle the stigma and prioritise it as a strategic imperative. If you want to be a destination employer of choice, you know, the people that I'm speaking to now who are coming into our organisation expect there to be a very, very clear mental health plan. How are they going to be supported? Are they encouraged to have open conversations? How are their line managers going to support them? If 1 in 3 people suffer from a mental health condition, that's an awful lot of people that are coming through your door all the time. So I think the first thing I would urge you to do is sign up to the standards and then have a health plan that sits alongside that.
And Simon, your moment has come.
Thanks very much. I'm Simon Blake, I'm the Chief Executive of Mental Health First Aid England. So I just thought it would be useful to set the context around the journey that we've been on around physical health and mental health, because it was only 50 years ago that 500,000 people were being injured at work with their physical injuries. It's taken 5 decades of legislation, action, on employers' front, from government, from individuals, to reduce that figure to 70,000. And what the Stevenson Farmer report told us was that 300,000 people are falling out of work each year due to mental ill health. To put that in context, that's everybody in Newcastle or everybody in Belfast each year because of mental ill health. So clearly the journey that we've been on with physical health, we now need to ensure that we continue the momentum with mental health, because clearly it's not acceptable. I think you're all here because you would agree it's not acceptable that mental ill health holds people back in the workplace in the 21st century. As we've heard, at any one time, 1 in 6 workers will be experiencing mental ill health, including depression, anxiety or work-related stress. And you know, that may be because of work itself, or it may be because of all of the things that happen in our daily lives outside of work. It actually doesn't matter. As employers, we have a responsibility to look at that. So I think the challenge now is for us to build on the 2 decades of raising fantastic work, raising awareness, and make sure that we move from talking, and it feels like we do quite a lot of talking, into practical action. So I think the really important bit is to say I don't think there's any silver bullet. People often saying, should we do this or should we do this? It feels as though we've actually got to do this and this and this and this and this, and just keep on trying and innovating and doing new things. And there are all sorts of initiatives where we are able to share that learning and to ensure that we develop the understanding together. Mental health isn't an area that businesses should be using their prevention, intervention support for competitive advantage. It should be an area that there's collaboration and sharing across industries, like there is in the City Mental Health Alliance or the construction industry. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, there is a resource hub called the Mental Health at Work Gateway, which provides all sorts of resources for businesses, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to make sure that that's already happening. So I think, arguably there's a moral case, and I don't think we can argue with the moral case, and if I had to choose between the moral case and the business case, I'd choose the moral case that we have to do this. But we often get told that actually it costs too much, but all of the evidence shows that for every pound you invest, you can save up to £9 in cost of the business. So whether you're a small business, whether you're a big business, the economic case also stacks up. So, as I said, it feels like we're time for moving from talking to is gone to action. And I am sitting at Conservative Party conference, people in government, but actually I think government has said this is important. Government has given the mandate. We have the Thriving at Work standards. We don't need to wait for government to say it's okay to do any more, or for government to tell us what to do. It is going to be businesses and employers who drive innovation. It will be businesses and employers who put pressure on government to keep on doing more. And I'm not saying government doesn't have a role, I'm just saying we don't need to wait for government to do anything else. There is plenty of support, plenty of mandate, and we just need to keep that momentum. So how do you do that? I think the most important thing is to be really clear that you can both hold high performance and well-being together. Sometimes people talk as if actually it's either high performance or well-being, and all of the evidence from the Chartered Institute of Personal Development, from Chartered Management Institute, is if you get the conditions for work right, then you get high performance, and getting the conditions for work right means being able to address well-being. So creating the conditions for people to thrive, making sure you've got the right culture, making sure that if there are areas that people are telling you are causing stress and burnout, you don't deal with the stress and burnout at the point people are stressed and burnout. You try and eradicate the things which are causing the stress and burnout. That we make sure that people know that mental health is something we want to talk about work, that we want everybody to bring their whole selves to work, and that can be done through your recruitment, your selection processes, your induction process, making sure that right up front we're tackling any stigma that exists, and that people know that this is something that we want to talk about in our workplaces, ensuring that people know how to offer and seek support, and that those pathways to further support are clear, of which mental health first aid is obviously an important part of being able to do that. So we at MHF England believe that mental health and physical health should have parity of esteem, which would include mental health first aid and physical first aid having parity of esteem. And I think it's become a word which can hide lots of things, but basically everything is done to promote mental health and well-being in the same way that we want to do everything to promote physical health and well-being, which includes getting job design right, which includes training for managers, which includes ensuring that we have digital technologies to help us, not cause us to be sat up at 9:30 at night answering messages which actually aren't that relevant to you anyway, and ensuring that we've got everything that we can, which is both employer-led and employee-led, to create a workplace in which people's well-being, their whole selves, their identities and their ability to thrive is done. I think mental health for me feels like it can be an organising frame. When I talk to employers, I often talk about the gender pay gap, race equity, ensuring that you're a disability confident employer. Actually, if you have got a massive gender pay gap, or you don't have any people from BAME communities in most senior levels, or you're not providing the reasonable adjustment to disabled people, you're not creating the context in which you can have a truly thriving workforce. So I think mental health and wellbeing for me feels like an organising frame for an awful lot of critical business issues, and would like to see some more of that integration around that.
Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's your moment. Would you like to ask any questions? Madam, over there.
We've just got
I
some
think
microphones.
there's somebody going to rush over to you with a microphone. And here it comes.
Thank you. I'm Natalie Neal. I'm an A&E nurse. Right, I think we need to rewind and we need to educate our GPs. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if you go and see a GP and you are suffering from minor stress levels, you are then put on medication, and I'm afraid you're left to get on with it. So I think the best way forward is to look at the GP's process, look at counselling process, and try and speed up that process in its entirety before you have to go to an A&E department with a crisis. Now, as an A&E nurse, that is completely wrong. It's the wrong place to be, and we should have potentially A&E units available, so when people are feeling that they're going through a crisis, or it gets to the point where they do feel suicidal, they can actually approach a service that would see them there and not have to wait with people with physical problems in an A&E waiting room.
I don't think anyone would disagree with you. The reason that we didn't talk about that is because we were talking specifically about workplaces, where I would, of course it does, and it's all interlinked, and I absolutely agree. I guess what I would just caution is generalisation. So in my own experience, GP was bloody brilliant. And there are very, very good GPs, and there are some who don't have the trained support. And I think you're absolutely right, there are systems issues. But I just think in the field around mental health, we've got some really, really, really good people in all professions, and then some who are not so great. But yes, what you've just described for me is part of the and. And it's all the different bits of the jigsaw, and I don't disagree with you at all.
Sir, at the back, it's on its way to you, sir.
Thank you.
And then you, sir, next.
Bob Hughes from Guildford. I run an organisation delivering significant social care. One of the problems, I thought, well, I wonder how much this applies to my business. Yeah, because we're a charity, we do nice things. And then when Simon was speaking, I was realising, yes, it does apply to my business. And I have one manager who is working herself to death. I can't stop her. I provide her with a PA, and that she doesn't use the PA properly, and she's physically got some problems, I think caused by overwork. Can't let any decision go, and it's a mental thing as far as I can see. She can't let any decision happen without her being in it, or if she happens not to be there, wants it rerun. And I keep saying, well, just leave it alone. Let your staff make decisions. They might not make the decisions as well as you, but you can't make every decision. I don't know what to do, but I will be reading your literature and looking at the website.
I'm very happy to have a conversation with you after.
Thank you. Yeah.
Not sure, and many of them are not sure how to deal with people who have mental health issues, but who would nevertheless be very capable of doing the job very well, but they're not sure how they're to be supported once they've got the job. You see what I mean? Thank you.
I'll take that.
I don't mind having a go. So I think the first thing is to raise awareness, and that's one of the standards. I think the second thing is that, it's very difficult to be an expert in mental health. But what you can do is provide training through Mental Health First Aid England, which we've done, and we've made a commitment to ensure that there's a mental health first aider in every single one of our offices. And we're going to have 2% of the workforce who have been trained. It's a 2-day comprehensive programme, and I'm a first aider, and I learned an awful lot about mental health, which I would not have ordinarily known had I not been through that training. It still doesn't make you an expert, but it allows you to look at the channels that you need to go to for the right advice for those individuals. But it is also about providing a good working environment, an inclusive working environment where people feel that they can have those open conversations and feel safe to have those. And I think promoting effective people management is absolutely critical. So to your point, sir, it's about ensuring that that individual is really, really clear that you support her not working ridiculous hours and actually encouraging her not to. I would suggest if you observe that there are potential stress levels.
There are organisations that help people into work as well, so it's not part of our brief, but there are some organisations that do help people.
There's a lady over there. I'm sorry, I'm getting the poor lady running around. and then a gentleman over here.
Hi there. I've got a huge passion for mental health, and that is because I suffer from mental health myself. I also work for the Department for Work and Pension, but that's not my capacity here. So I've been working with who suffer from mental health, and a lot of areas where communities that don't understand for those people, because a lot of businesses cannot afford to pay to become a mental health first aider, and that's also one of the things that is a huge concern. There's loads of things that I can think of. Part of the training of the mental health first aider, it doesn't touch on emotions, and that's part of the children with mental health, and it is quite huge. And a lot of it is about emotions, and that emotions triggers off a lot of depression, a lot of the mental health, a lot of suicide. So there's a lot of things that are missing within the mental health first aid training that I personally feel, and speaking to a lot of people. But I think I think we need some support for people who are communities that don't have the payment or capacity to pay for that mental health first training for business and stuff. So what is going to be happening for those people?
I can answer that. Part of, as a community interest company, what we do is we use our profits from selling courses to business, to government, and that use that money those profits to fund training for those who can't afford it.
But also, it is a classic, isn't it? There is, my point was there is no one single silver bullet, and again, I can't do anything other than agree with you that there is more that is needed. I spoke at the DWP conference a while ago, and for people who are supporting as members of staff through a first aid programme, and their point was very much this is about the front line as well. But this, there has to be commitment to whole systems change and development and understanding around these things. So what are we doing? Exactly what Mark said, but there isn't, I just think can't reiterate enough that there isn't a single answer. So there are organisations like Action for Children that are doing brilliant work around mental health. There's organisations like Young Mind who are making sure that young people's voices are involved in the NHS long-term plan. And the thing which we have to be really clear about is we'll only achieve this if we all recognise that we've got a part to play, but we are not the part. There are so many organisations who just do brilliant work at community level. The issue is, of course, around scaling up, around resource, around capacity, around moving on, around the short-term nature of it all, and those are all systems problems which we just have to try and deal with on a, however best we can, and to keep on presenting those through into local authorities, to community action councils, etc.
Schools, universities?
Schools, everyone.
I'd also add and maybe kind of caution a little bit that we don't want to put pressure on employers or communities at any level to sort of make them feel like they have to then become counsellors almost.
Yeah, of course.
And like you said, your point around emotions is spot on, and that is something that people need support around and how to handle it. But at the same time, we will get the sort of reverse outcome if we do kind of make it too much like an employer feels like, oh, I'm a line manager, this person suffering from different emotions, they're going through a difficult time, whatever it might be, and rather than thinking, actually, can I just even point them to time when we can chat, helpline, I can, signal different ways to help without feeling like I'm going to be in a position where I need to then try to take on some of that from the person as well. And we all are compassionate people, and we all want to help, and we've all got our life experiences to help us empathise. But there is that line, and that actually could not help the person if we do cross that. So I think it's worth sort of just caveating that.
I make a quick point about young people. Two of my children went through issues around mental health issues. They're both doing really well. Both not very well supported in education, further education situations, one of which has an element of teaching mental health, which is a bit embarrassing. I just wanted to make that point. But anyway, my question for the panel. I chair a health and wellbeing partnership in my town, which we started after some services closed in our local hospital, and I was determined that that wasn't going to become a landslide for other things. And we did a needs analysis of what our demographic needs analysis of what our community is like, and mental health obviously came out very high. You're obviously here about business, and I get that and understand that, but as a local councillor working in the community, I wondered what help you or advice you could offer to help people like myself and my other council colleagues to actually get partnerships and strategy to kind of help mental health be supported within our communities, whether that is with young people or whether that's at work or in other situations. You know, people have mental health issues not because they're necessarily working, it could be other reasons, as you've already said. So I hope that question's clear.
Who wants to answer?
I'm conscious I'm talking a lot, that's the reason I'm looking, but I'm happy to talk.
Well, I can sort of give an example, I suppose, from my point of view. I met an MP a while ago that actually was looking at particularly mental health in his constituency, and was quite worried that the sort of male suicide rate was particularly high in his area. And what he discovered from kind of investigating it a bit was that there was a lot of mental health support, but no one knew about each other.
Absolutely.
So, and that was exactly the problem. So sometimes areas can get a bit of a bad rap because they apparently aren't doing enough in this area, when actually it's just that they're not talking to each other. So he helps to facilitate kind of forums where we'd actually identify people from all the different services, whether it be kind of from an official, more government-led kind of project, or whether it be schools, colleges, local charities, all of them, and brought them together to help them actually realise actually we can all help each other. If you're lacking resource, but I can help you with a room, I can help you with resource, I can do the social media for you, whatever it might be, to help get the message out there and talk to each other. That's what he facilitated. And it sounds like a really simple thing to say, well, just get people in a room. But sometimes that's all it needs, it's just for other people to know. And so if you're in a school, if you're in a college, or if you're in a business, at the very least you can think, I can reach out and I know there are people I can go to get the help and resource I need.
And I guess very specifically, if we know where you are, we might well know some key people that can put you in contact who will have much greater local knowledge. So do feel free, we've got contact details to email, and then we can try and put you in touch.
Thank you.
Madam, your moment has come.
Thank you. My name's Catherine Scott. I'm the Director of Policy at the British Psychological Society, which is why I've been crying for the microphone. We represent 60,000 psychologists across the country, including Simon. And I just wanted to, my question, so what we do is we're looking at the psychological workforce right across the piece. So speaking to the lady who was working at A&E before, we're looking at how we could get more psychology into GP practices, into primary care networks. And what I'd like the panel to reflect on, if possible, is how does mental health first aid sit within a broader provision of psychological services, occupational psychology within a workplace? I think that this gentleman's question earlier as well about how to, look at more structural issues around what a good workplace looks like. So members of the British Psychological Society are looking at designing good work. They're looking at performance management systems, and all of that is kind of part of the piece. So I was wondering, particularly the lady from Bauer Media, if you could talk a little bit about how this is sort of fitting in within the broader perspective of what can be done in the workplace.
Okay. So we've recently partnered with the BPS, and we use your services actually to tackle the issue of boundaries. Because, as I said, mental health first aider isn't an expert in mental health. So we're working far more with the BPS in terms of just understanding what other things we can do. We do have occupational therapists as well that we work with, and we have an employee assistance programme which is available to people 24/7, free to all their family members, not just their employees. So we do tackle it in lots of different ways. Could there be more that we could do with the BPS? I'm sure there could be. We're on the start of this journey, so it's really understanding that, but what we're learning along the way, and the boundaries thing was something that came up because one of our mental health first aiders was just feeling a bit overwhelmed by all the people that were going to talk to her about the very different levels of experiences they were under. So yeah, does that answer your question?
And can I just be really clear that a mental health first aider isn't a counsellor, isn't a therapist. Their job is to signpost to other forms of support, and in the workplace that's an employee assistance programme or other forms of support which might be available in the community. And one of the things, we're obviously fairly new and learning, and one of the things that we know is that has to be absolutely crystal clear in the new guidance we published. Just to follow on from that, one of the things which we know from all of our work is that people are now recognising that this is much bigger than people thought it was. It's actually about good work. It's about humane work. It's about, when you're talking about in the context of work, it's about all of the principles of good HR, good management, all the things that you know, and it's bringing that into one pot in order to do it. So I'd say I'd love to talk more.
I'm going to ask you, sir, and then you, Helen.
I'm Parag from Dialogue Society. Very interesting presentation. Firstly, I would like to recommend everyone here to sign up for the mandate that MHFA put forward in the Exhibition Centre, and I'm looking forward to take up the first aid course. Another question I would like to know is how we can differentiate at the workplace the level of mental health problems that employees have. For example, if an employee going through short-term kind of mental health problems like pressure tasks or problems with a colleague or line manager, or on the other side there is another employee who has been going through with difficult like long-term mental health like families or financial situations. I just would like to find out how we should treat these two separate. If we ignore the first short-term ones, are we ignoring the prevention, and just how we can understand that? Thank you.
I think you have to treat everybody as an individual, and I think there's people have all sorts of different issues that they're facing. Some things are as a result of their experiences in the workplace, and some as a result of personal circumstances. And I think you just have to treat them as individuals. I don't think there's a blanket answer. I think you have to build a relationship with that individual to really understand what their needs are and what you can do as an employer to support them through whatever it is they're facing. And it may be that you have to make reasonable adjustments, or it may be that they have some time off, but then they come back on a phased basis. It really depends on the individual, and I think that's what I would encourage you to do. There isn't a one size fits all. It's making sure you understand the needs of that person.
I think this lady here is. Right, okay. Yes.
Steph Kenyon from the Association of British Insurers. So it's a really fascinating discussion, and it's good to see so many people here. So this is obviously an issue that we as insurers and providers of financial products have been working on, from providing some of the services that you've all referenced, but also as employers as well. So we recently did some research with our members and found that 82% of our firms are using mental health first aid programs and products and services to help their own employees and improve their own sort of inclusion around mental health. I guess one of my questions is, and there's so many streams of things that all fit together, but we've talked about prevention a little bit, and where mental health fits for the panel in terms of the prevention, especially in the Cure Green Paper, particularly for workplaces, because the problem is with the economy, if we can intervene quicker and help people before they go out of work, we don't get that productivity lost.
I mean, 100%, isn't it? Prevention is always better, and I think one of the reasons why workplaces is so important, that as health promotion people, so my previous life was in health promotion, we're very good at working with children and young people, because you've got schools and you think schools can solve things, or churches, but actually workplaces have never been as subscribed, I think, to any issue around health in quite the same way that might be around mental health. I think people have really got behind smoking campaigns and some around alcohol, but it feels a little bit nanny state-ish within the workplace. But actually everybody is saying mental health is something which we feel really important. So, so I think this is why the learning process is so important. It's how do you build confidence to take this as an issue, but absolutely prevention has to be better than, well, prevention has to be a really important plank, doesn't it, to do whatever we can. I think just worth saying, let's be really clear when we talk about well-being, let's be really clear when we talk about promoting mental health, and let's be clear when we talk about mental illness, and make sure that we know and understand that in order to know where, when we talk about prevention, early intervention, secondary prevention, etc.
So,
well, my question was actually, do you think there's any merit in giving mental health training and services based on a sector by sector? We've touched upon about the male suicide rate, and I think at the start you mentioned construction. So it's just interesting where, you know, an industry that I think is still predominantly male, is there a merit in providing that service on a sector by sector basis, while still respecting that each individual is an individual?
Construction industry is a really good case study. So please don't really. So there are two people die every single day in the construction industry by suicide. And the Construction Industry Training Board recognised that this is a sector-wide issue and provided funding for a sector-wide approach. And yeah, I knew nothing about construction before coming into this job. I didn't realise quite how much of the sector was small and medium enterprises, because you always see, you know, the big ones, don't you, as you go through towns. But actually this sector-wide approach has enabled both the smaller and the bigger to work together, but also to really find some new ways of talking about it, which are specific and recognise the demographics of those sectors. There's commonalities and there's individualities, and I think it's like everything, isn't it? That it isn't an either or, because actually people who are construction workers will also be churchgoers and parents, and actually how you try and engage in different facets of people's life, I think, can be really, really important.
And I don't think it's a sort of thing where you roll out some training, then all of a sudden you ignore the individual needs. It's just the training for me, or even just reading up on mental health and taking that on board in your own initiative, is a way for you to then feel you're enabled to then help identify individual needs. So I think it's almost a means to that, to get you to that point, rather than actually sort of overriding it.
I'm going to. This gentleman has been patiently waving me all. So and then you said.
Okay.
And then you.
Oh, thank you.
I've been a police officer for 24 years, and I've dealt with many people in that period of crisis. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to be conscious of the use of language. We've heard a lot today, or this week, of the use of emotive language in Parliament, and when it comes around mental health issues as well, we need to be mindful of, we're speaking to a person, we're not speaking to a diagnosis or a condition. And one of the things I'm afraid I've got to address the comment that was made right at the start here about people with mental health conditions going to A&E. Very quite often that message comes back that I've got a mental health condition, I'm not wanted in A&E. It still could be appropriate in that place at that time. Just because somebody has a condition doesn't mean to say they always need the help and support. Just like somebody has epilepsy doesn't mean they're having a seizure every single day. It's down for individual needs. And we need to be mindful of that and get that conversation going. You've got the openness, and you're speaking to John, you're speaking to Jenny, you're speaking to Fred, you're speaking to Francis, and you're not speaking to a diagnosis. Okay, thank you.
Can I just make a comment? I wrote a blog last week about the importance of language, so it's a slightly different end and lens than you've just described. But I set you a challenge. When you go out of this room, listen to how many times people say something was crazy, mad, mental, or insane today. And if you are in the conversation, you encourage them to think about, was it wild, or was it abhorrent, or was it absurd, or was it something else? Because that stigma, which is just there in the everyday language, is something that I've really learnt over the last year. It was just there, you know, it's part of the air conditioning, and then you turn it off, you're like, oh, yeah, this is really heavy. So your challenge for the afternoon, listen to yourself, because it won't just be other people, it's all of us that will do it, but also listen to other people and challenge yourself to think about different words which actually more accurately describe what it is we've got into lazy and stigmatising ways of describing.
And mental health itself. Everybody has mental health. You might have mental good health, or you might have mental poor health. I'm with this gentleman, with this gentleman.
Thank you very much. My name is Wei Li Ho. I'm a member of the Chinese Friends of the Conservatives, and I'm also a district councillor. Insurance companies, well, there you go.
I was looking at my physical health.
A lot of insurance companies now accept claims for mental health issues that prevent them from working. So I was wondering what interactions you have with the protection industry to kind of keep the ball rolling and keeping it going.
At this point, not very much, but we can talk. Do you want to answer?
Yeah, it's something we've definitely been working on to improve our connections, and part of the process of understanding mental ill health conditions and how they can be temporal as well, and then how we treat the customers, as the gentleman said, as individuals, and you know, big insurance firms, that is a slow process, but we are really trying. We're doing a project specifically this year with our protection members and with our health insurance providers, looking at how we can improve the way we process claims. With everything with insurance, when anybody comes to a claim, it's at the worst point in a, you know, be it a car crash, be it a mental health claim, and so how we can support them through those processes.
I'd love to have a chat with you afterwards.
Yeah, still here.
Thank you. Mark Brooks. I work for a non-for-profit organisation called Dimensions, and we have 7,000 ratio over staff. Most of them are support workers, and then we support over 4,000 people with learning disability and autism. So we do a lot of work around mental health, because some people have a learning disability and a mental health. And just one thing, I work with an organisation called the Mental Health Foundation, and they've just got a 3-year funding to set up groups around the country for people with learning disabilities and mental health, and set up groups, and I've been involved in the first lot of training to test it, but hopefully we hope to take it out nationally for people to do the training and then to set up groups around the country.
Brilliant. The Mental Health Foundation is based about half a mile away from us, and so we talk often, so we'll find out about it, so thanks for letting us know.
Sorry, there's so many hands going up. I'm sitting there.
So, Elizabeth Anderson, I have had the experience of being in my organisation, someone I don't particularly know well approaches me. I say, how are you, the way you just normally do, and they give me the honest answer, which is, well, actually, I've just been diagnosed with depression. And actually, it's really difficult, just as a colleague, to know what to do with that. Now, if you think about statutory regulation, we all have to learn about data protection, we all have to learn about equality and diversity, and we all have to learn about health and safety. We might hate learning about health and safety, but it's actually really important. So you have the first aiders who take that to the next level, but everyone has that basic awareness of how their desk should look and not to trip over wires. Do you foresee a regulatory element to this in future, where actually just that basic awareness of how you work with colleagues, what you do if somebody talks to you about that sort of thing, do you foresee that becoming just a part of what you learn, a part of induction that is just expected in every company?
I mean, certainly we've just introduced it as mandatory, because I think it's essential that people are given at least a kind of, you know, a broad view about how to tackle things. So it goes back to the people management aspect again. So it's part of our induction process, it's part of all. So yeah, I think it should be mandatory, because I think that, you know, people need to be educated and I think line managers are given line management responsibility but don't always get educated in the same way around mental health issues.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I had an example actually of a friend recently. He's working for a very well-known, quite a global company, but he's a contractor, so he doesn't have any line reports, anything like that. Goes in, does his analysis and what have you, and goes home. His permanent line manager, who is therefore responsible for people below him, had an employee, one of his, approach him recently to say he'd been diagnosed with depression, and presumably wanted to know, A, just let him know, but also what kind of support he could get and that kind of thing. And so the line manager just actually handed this person off to my friend, the contractor, who had never done this before, wasn't a line manager in any other role, hadn't had any training, nothing. And luckily he's aware enough around mental health and mental illness to at least know that he needs to try and support the person. But it was absolutely not the way to do it. And so, I mean, I'm always trying to edge away from anything where we do over-legislate. But I do think that it is a bit ridiculous that we almost said madness then, there we are, me already doing it. But I do think it is quite ridiculous that we do legislate around making sure your physical health is looked after reasonably in the workplace, but we don't consider the mental part of it, which end to day is all health. And then in an ideal world, we'll get to the point where we talk about health, we don't have to differentiate between the physical or the mental. So yeah, I personally would like to see that brought forward.
Well, it just. I'm sorry. I'm a confession to make. I'm a lawyer as well. It's funny. There's always a boo whenever I get into that. It's one thing that people don't realise is that employers, just as if they're responsible for failing to prevent an accident, they under the present law have liability if they fail to address if they're found to aggravate the condition of an employee who finds themselves in a mental health crisis. And the curious way the law is at the moment is that when an employee reaches the stage of crisis, the employee is least able to look after himself, and the employer, by and large, is least equipped to know what to do. So there is actually a commercial and a legal reason why one needs to have this in place. I'm sorry.
No, and the HSE, I thought you were going to talk about the HSE guidance, which was updated last year to include that employees should do a mental health needs assessment. And so from that, recognising that it would be a pretty unusual place if there weren't issues which needed to be responded to, then there is a ground. So we will continue to talk to the regulator, as lots of others do, and around legislation. But the important bit is getting that proactive and reactive, isn't it? And finding out what we can do.
So I noticed your
Thank
hand.
you. Good afternoon. Martin Boniface. I'm now retired, I'm pleased to say, but one of the things that keeps me busy is working with Food Bank, in particular in Worcester City. Despite being an affluent area, we have something like 6,500 clients last year, and that's climbing. My question is, it's interesting to hear everything that can be done from an employment perspective. We are a charity, we're all unpaid volunteers, and one of the areas we're grappling with at the moment is how do we help volunteers spot if clients coming in have mental health issues. And we see a huge variety of people across all walks of life and spectrums. But also related to that, how do we ensure that we look out for the mental health and well-being of our volunteers, who are often dealing with some very troubled people and some very traumatic and upsetting stories. And we don't have the money. Any money we get goes on buying food.
I had supper with Emma Revy, who is the Chief Exec of Drusilla Trust, a couple of weeks ago, and we promised to have a more detailed conversation. We were out with other friends. So it's a consistent conversation, an issue that has come up over the Labour conference with them around here. So I'm really glad you raised it. I don't have any answer at the moment, but I will talk to you.
I was with Emma yesterday, so thank you.
I'm conscious that that our time is running short.
Can I ask a question before you finish?
But what I'm going to do is to take 3 questions. You sir, and you sir in the corner, and then ask the panel to address those and then wrap up.
Hi, I might as well just shout, Reggie. I'm Martin Washburn, I'm a standard delegate here. I was very struck by your story about the workaholic employee. My boss is a bit of one. And I think one of the issues you kind of have is that if somebody themselves is a workaholic and they are in a line management position, they expect everyone around them to be just as workaholic. And I thought it would be the elephant in the room question. I did. I genuinely thought it. Because then they expect you, they sort of say, oh, can you do an extra hour? And you go, oh, go on. Because I'm a nice bloke, I'll go on then. And then that's expected. So you're then working rather than 37-hour week, 38-hour week. And then they go, can you do a bit more? And then by the time, 3 or 4 months go down, you realise you're doing like a 43-hour week. You're not taking any lunch breaks, you don't go outside. So the question, I suppose, is, in that condition, how do we sort of deal with the workaholic line manager whilst not looking like a slacker, in a way that doesn't sort of involve HR and getting all messy, because then it becomes then a bit of an issue rather than something that's actually just...
I think, we see...
We'll do the 3 and then we'll take it.
Oh, okay.
Right. My name's John Dawson and I work for a Member of Parliament, and we often get cases where there's a lack of support for mental health patients. But anyway, my question is this: you're all talking about employers and mental health, and I don't just want a general inquiry. I've got several friends who suffer from depression and other mental health issues, and I know at least 2 people who went for interviews, and one of them, she was told she had suffered from depression, so she never got the job for that reason. And then there was another person who was offered the job, and then when they fill in their health form, the mental health issues, they then never get the job at that stage, when they were taking up references. And then I know other folk, somebody in Harrow Council, for example, and she's got an honours degree in Spanish and other things, she's well qualified. And once they found out she had mental health issues, she never got her contract renewed. So what I want to know is, what is available to help well-qualified people not to be discriminated and to get them recruited and retained in the workplace? Because they've been discriminated against just in the same way as disabled folk sometimes are, or gay folk used to be. But these folk with mental health issues, once the employers knew that they had mental health issues, they either never got the job, or they never got the contract renewed, or they never passed their probation. So what is there out there to help well-qualified people with mental health issues to be recruited and retained in the workplace? That's the question.
And then the last of the 3 questions, the gentleman in the corner.
I'll try to speak loudly. So, I'm
Sorry, it's just for the camera, if that's okay, if you can still use the mic. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Damien from the John Lewis Partnership. So I wanted to ask a question really about whether the taxation system can do more to support employers. At the moment, policy and the taxation system is focused very much on reactively managing sickness absence, and instead of trying to prevent it and actually early intervention as well. Within the partnership, we offer free in-house physical and mental health to all of our 83,000 partners. And we've had some really good successes with that, and we spend 20 million a year actually on those services, but they're actually treated as a benefit in kind in the same way as a company car. Is there more that actually the taxation system can do to support companies for investing in in-house occupational health services?
Right. would you like to start? Would like to start?
I'll kick it off then. So, doing first one around challenging sort of workaholic kind of employees. The business I used to work for, it was a prime example where there were some teams where, because their boss didn't take a lunch, they felt they could never take a lunch. There would be times on Friday, people would have kids to pick up and things, and suddenly somebody would come in and they'd be like, we need you to block out all of these rooms, and I need you to get these invites out and everything, and you don't feel like you can say, no, actually, I've got to go and do X, even though that is just as important as your job. I think some of it is going to be around culture, and the more others can actually start leading by example. And bear in mind, I know it's a bit cliche, but we're all leaders in that way. It isn't just because of your title that makes you a leader. So when I was in this department and I started observing this, and I've come from a very different area and I wasn't used to it, I had luckily a few colleagues around me who would set this example. So they would actually block out in their calendar time for lunch. And then if they wanted to change that, have a meeting then instead, that was fine. But they made it very clear to people they would be taking time out. They were also challenging people to say, well, look, I've noticed this week you've been working extra hard, you've been doing loads of hours. Is everything okay? Is it just a busy period for you? Do you need any help? And not to criticise people, but just be aware of everyone around you. There was one thing that I saw that really I've never forgotten it, and it was this one weekend they had this massive rehearsal weekend for a project that was going to go live soon. And loads of people were doing kind of really wacky shifts all weekend, getting pizza in and coffee and all sorts. But everyone was still doing their kind of relatively normal hours, except for one guy who refused to take a break and did a 40-hour shift. And I don't know how he did it, and I mean, it's superhuman strength, I don't know, but the problem afterwards was that he actually got recognition in our team buzz the week afterwards to say, wow, what a feat kind of thing, celebrating this. And I actually thought, well, I'm not saying you should get him up there and condemn him, but to me, that would have been a flag to say, well, why didn't anyone insist he took a break? Why are we showing this as a good example of workplace practice? So I think, yes, there's probably a lot of people from organisations and training and support, but actually the answer, and the more annoying answer would be, it's down to the individual. And you've got to recognise it in yourself and others and start to lead by that example, and that's the only way it's going to change. In terms of having sort of those with mental illness getting into work and not being discriminated against, I mean, obviously that's partly legal. We need to be much better at enforcing that and identifying that when that's happening. But also, I think it is going to stem from culture. Unfortunately, there's still going to be some ignorance around this. And fear, I think it's not actually that people think that person couldn't do the job, but it's actually, am I equipped to help that person if they are working and I do hire them and they are suffering from something? And it seems ridiculous to me. If you have someone who's a wheelchair user, it isn't difficult to think, well, I might need to just make sure the floor is accessible and that kind of thing. And we do that without question. But there's still that problem around those with mental illness. What does that mean for me? And I think if we get better at actually helping the wider sort of business population understand what it means for them, straight away I think they'll realise that actually it's not that big a deal, and I can be there for this person and they can be valuable in my team. The last question, I'm afraid I'm going to give that to the rest of the panel, because I don't think I've probably got quite the knowledge and know-how to give you a good answer on that one.
Or any of those questions.
Okay. So I agree completely with Drusilla on the first 2 points, and so I don't have a great deal more to offer there, but I do think it is absolutely about the culture of the organisation. You have to be inclusive, and inclusivity is, making sure that you embrace difference and making sure that you treat everyone as an individual. Obviously, you have the Disability Discrimination Act, which protects people who have a disability, and mental health is now seen as a disability, so people should be protected. on the taxation issue, I'm afraid I'm going to hand it over to
I think I don't have too much to add around the particular experiences, except to say there are 300,000 people each year, and we have to be more impatient about shifting that, and shifting that through culture, through legislation, through education, and through support. And we can talk afterwards and talk to you about some organisations that might have some more specific examples. But I think we should be more impatient, and two, it might be easier for us to talk about wellbeing programmes than actually about people with mental illness and their experience of work, and so would urge all of us to think that they're all important, and that we must get better at that. I guess before saying about I don't know enough about the answers to taxation. Intuitively, it sounds as though it could be very sensible, but I did economics A-level and there it stops. And so maybe this is next year's fringe meeting, but it'd be great to have a conversation. And then the third thing, just very quickly, I think we have to acknowledge that we do have some problems actually with leaders. I remember myself about 20 years ago being told that people needed a break from me as much as I needed a break from work and to get off the email. 5 years before that I didn't have email, and so I couldn't really do anything when I was at work, so I didn't have a phone, I didn't have a laptop. So there is a culture shift, and email became good and helped us, and I think it's now probably damaging people. Afraid, if it's really urgent, phone me on my holiday. We used to say if it's really urgent, talk to this person. So I think there are some cultural things we've all got to do, and leaders, chief execs have a particular responsibility. But to absolutely echo that point, we also have our own personal responsibility to not look at our work emails just before we go to bed, because it will impact on our sleep likely, and therefore we'll be less equipped tomorrow. And when a man says, you might have other commitments. We can't allow work to dominate life. We've got childcare, parents to look after, dogs to walk, hobbies, whatever it is. When we have to take that care of ourselves. And if you are someone who manages someone like that, actually it's not about supporting someone without creating a very clear expectation. If we don't say, we expect you to allow other people to make decisions, other people to go home at the right times, and for you to make that happen, we can provide the support, but too often we ask the question rather than say, we expect this, now how do we make it happen?
I'm conscious that our time has run out, but if anybody would like to ask a question or say hello afterwards, I'm sure I and all the others would be delighted to say so. Thank you so much. You've been absolutely